You're not worth the uniform you wear. Those words weren't spoken in a closed office. They echoed through the marble lobby beneath a crystal chandelier that cost more than a house. Elias felt the weight of 30 stairs burning into his back. The sound of silverware stopped. The background music seemed to vanish. Elias hadn't robbed the hotel safe. He hadn't been rude to a millionaire guest. Elias's crime was trying to stop a warm loaf of bread and a piece of untouched meat from being thrown into the garbage, while a man shook with hunger on the other side of the glass. In that moment, as the hotel manager snatched the plate from the homeless man's hands and, looking him dead in the eye, threw the food into the trash mixed with coffee grounds and ash, Elias realized something brutal. He wasn't just losing his job of 3 years. He was witnessing the public execution of human dignity, and the sentence had already been passed. The rule was worth more than a life. If you are part of the group of people who believe that character is worth far more than a corporate code of conduct, if you believe that real justice isn't always found in the law but in the conscience, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to the channel now and hit the bell. Join our community. Because Elias's story, which we are going to tell today, will test the limits of your empathy and make you question, what is, after all, the price of your soul? Settle in. Take a deep breath. Let's enter the Grandview Hotel. The Grandview Hotel wasn't just a building in the city center. It was a fortress. An island of red velvet and gold surrounded by a sea of gray asphalt and concrete. To those rushing by on the street, it was imposing, almost threatening with its Greek columns and doormen who looked like living statues, forbidding entry to anyone who didn't carry the scent of money. But for those who entered, the world outside ceased to exist. The air inside had a specific smell. An intoxicating mix of fresh lilies replaced every 4 hours, antique wood polish, and imported perfumes. The silence in the lobby was almost religious, broken only by the soft clinking of crystal glasses in the adjacent restaurant and the muffled sound of Italian leather shoes sinking into Persian rugs. In this delicate ecosystem, Elias was a fundamental, though invisible, piece. At 28 years old, Elias had dedicated the last 3 to mastering the art of serving. He wasn't just a waiter, he was an efficient ghost. He knew when to refill a wine glass before the customer even realized it was empty. He knew how to smile without showing his teeth, an expression that denoted absolute servitude but no intimacy. Elias needed that job desperately. At home, the reality was very different from the luxury of the hotel. His mother's medication bills piled up on the wobbly kitchen table. The rent was 10 days late. Every extra shift, every tip left by a distracted executive, every holiday worked meant one more month of survival. That's why Elias swallowed his pride. He swallowed the exhaustion that made his legs tremble at the end of the day. He swallowed the insults when he was treated like furniture. He did all this because the Grandview paid well, and the price of that salary was his total submission to the rules. And the guardian of those rules was Mr. Sterling. Sterling didn't walk the corridors, he patrolled them. The hotel's general manager was a thin man, with posture so rigid he seemed to have a steel beam in place of a spine. His suits were tailored without a single wrinkle, and his eyes were cold scanners programmed to detect flaws. He had the unnerving habit of running his index finger over door frames to inspect for non-existent dust. If he found a grain of dirt, someone would be fired. For Sterling, the Grandview didn't host people. It hosted perfection. The guest doesn't pay for the bed, Elias, he used to say in the morning meetings, with his monotonous and icy voice while adjusting his gold cufflinks. The guest pays to forget that the world outside is dirty, chaotic, and ugly. We are the barrier. Nothing ugly enters here. Nothing imperfect remains here. Elias nodded as he did every morning. He lowered his head like a good soldier. He didn't know that, on that rainy Tuesday, he would become the imperfection that Sterling was so eager to eliminate. It was shortly after 2 in the afternoon. The executive lunch hour was coming to an end. The hotel restaurant, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, offered a panoramic view of the city. But on that day, the view was bleak. An autumn storm was punishing the city without mercy. The rain didn't fall. It whipped against the glass as if wanting to break it. The wind howled around the corners, turning umbrellas inside out and pushing trash through the clogged gutters. Inside the restaurant, however, the climate was artificially perfect. The air conditioning kept the temperature constant. Soft jazz played in the background, muffling the sound of thunder. The contrast was violent. Elias was clearing table 4 near the window. The table had been occupied by a group of bankers who spent 2 hours discussing mergers and mass layoffs while barely touching their food. That table was a graveyard of waste. There was a basket of artisanal sourdough bread with a golden crust and soft crumb which hadn't even been touched. There were platters with prime cuts of meat slowly cooling, losing their steam. There was a gourmet club sandwich, assembled with meticulous care, cut into 4 perfect triangles, from which only a small bite had been taken from one piece. Elias picked up the heavy tray. The smell of the food was delicious. The hotel protocol glowed in red letters in his mind. Everything that leaves the kitchen and touches the table is considered contaminated. Destination, organic waste. He sighed, feeling that familiar pang of guilt he always felt throwing kilos of food away while knowing his own fridge was empty. He began to stack the fine china plates when a subtle movement on the other side of the glass caught his attention. Outside, practically pressed against the thick glass of the restaurant, trying to protect himself under the small awning, was a man. Let's call him Arthur. Arthur looked like he had been sculpted by misery itself. His clothes were a patchwork of soaked fabric stained with mud. He wore a coat 3 sizes too big for his skeletal frame, and his feet were wrapped in plastic supermarket bags inside hole-ridden shoes. Water ran down his face, dripping from a sparse graying beard. But it wasn't Arthur's appearance that stopped Elias's heart. It was the look. Arthur wasn't looking at the rich customers. He wasn't looking at the jewelry or gold watches. He was looking, with a hypnotic and painful intensity, at the sandwich on Elias's tray. It was the look of primal hunger, that type of hunger that hurts the stomach, that causes dizziness, that makes a human being regress to the basic instinct of survival. Arthur placed a dirty hand on the glass, as if trying to magically reach through to grab the bread. He was shaking violently, and Elias didn't know if it was from cold, from hunger, or from the fear of dying right there on the sidewalk. The world stopped for a second for Elias. On one side of the glass, warmth, jazz, and top-quality food going into a bin. On the other side, cold, the sound of rain, and a man fading away little by little. Elias glanced quickly at the lobby. Mr. Sterling was not in sight. The reception was busy. The path between table 4 and the pantry bin was short, but the path between table 4 and the side service door was just 2 meters longer. The corporate training voice screamed in Elias's mind, "Do not feed. Do not interact. Call security immediately." But his mother's voice, the voice of the humanity that still remained in him, screamed louder, "It's just bread, my son. It's just food that will rot in a landfill. No one will miss it." Elias made the decision. It wasn't a planned act of rebellion, it was a reflex of compassion. With quick and precise movements, he took 2 white linen napkins, thick, expensive. In one, he wrapped the still warm artisanal breads. In the other, he placed the 3 intact pieces of the sandwich and the rustic potatoes. He gathered it all into a compact bundle and placed it discreetly under the tray, hidden by a dirty towel. He walked toward the pantry, but at the last second he veered off. He pushed the heavy service door that led to the side alley, where the air conditioning exhaust created a small, dry, noisy shelter. Arthur was huddled nearby, hugging his knees, trying to conserve the little heat he had. When the door opened, Arthur shrank back even further, covering his head with his arms, expecting a shout, a curse, or a kick. That was what he received from most people. "Hey," Elias whispered, his voice urgent, checking the sides. "Hey, friend. Don't be afraid." Arthur slowly lowered his arms. His eyes were red and bloodshot. Elias held out the white linen bundle. The heat of the food traveled through the fabric and met Arthur's freezing hands. "Take it. Quick. It's hot. There's meat and bread." Arthur looked at the bundle as if it were a mirage in the desert. His dirty, trembling hands reached out with hesitation, as if he expected Elias to pull the food back at the last instant as a cruel joke. When he touched the warm bread, a sound escaped his throat, a low, animal moan of pure relief. God bless you, sir," Arthur stammered, opening the bundle greedily, not caring about etiquette. Elias smiled, a sad but genuine smile. For a second, he wasn't employee number 402. He was just a man helping another. "Eat quickly," said Elias, "and try to stay dry." Elias began to back away toward the door, feeling his heart rate slow down. He had done it. No one had seen. He had saved someone's day. But when he turned to re-enter the warmth of the hotel, the door was already open, and filling the frame, blocking the warm light and the return to safety, was the unmistakable, tall, slender silhouette of Mr. Sterling. Sterling wasn't screaming. Anger is a hot human emotion. Sterling was ice cold. He looked at Elias with the clinical curiosity of a biologist who just found a disgusting insect on his clean countertop. "Interesting," said Sterling. His voice was low, soft, but it cut through the sound of the rain like a razor. "Very interesting, Elias. Mr. Sterling, I can explain," Elias began, but the words died in his dry throat. Sterling raised a perfectly manicured hand, demanding silence. He took a step outside, into the rain and the filth of the alley, not caring that the water soaked his $3,000 Italian suit. He walked up to Arthur. The homeless man stopped eating instantly. He had the sandwich in his hand halfway to his mouth. The smell of bacon and melted cheese was intoxicating, but the fear radiating from Sterling was greater. Arthur shrank against the damp wall, trying to become invisible, trying to disappear into the brick. "That food," began Sterling, speaking with impeccable diction, "belongs to the exclusive inventory of the Grandview Hotel. It was paid for by our shareholders, prepared by our world-class culinary team." He turned slowly to Elias with a sneer of contempt. "Did you buy this sandwich, Elias? Did you swipe your card at the register and legally acquire this item?" "No, sir," Elias whispered, feeling his stomach turn with nausea. "But it was going in the trash. The customer didn't touch it. I just didn't want to waste it while he—" "The destination of the asset is irrelevant," Sterling cut in, his voice rising an octave. "Possession is what matters. And you transferred possession of a company asset to an unauthorized third party. That has a name, Elias. It's called theft." Then came the moment that would haunt Elias forever. The moment of gratuitous cruelty. Sterling turned back to Arthur. The starving man held the sandwich against his chest, protecting it as if it were a newborn child. "Give it back," ordered Sterling. Simple as that. Time stopped. Elias took a desperate step forward. "Sir, please don't do this. Deduct it from my salary. I'll pay the menu price. I'll pay double. Let him eat. He's shaking." Sterling ignored Elias completely as if he were a ghost. He kept his eyes fixed on Arthur. "I won't ask twice. Return the hotel property now, or security will call the police for theft, trespassing, and threatening behavior." Arthur looked at Elias, then at Sterling. Hot tears ran down his dirty face, mixing with the cold rain. He knew he had no chance. That man in the suit had the power to destroy him, to send him to jail. With hands trembling violently, sobbing quietly, Arthur held out the bitten sandwich and the bread rolls. Sterling didn't touch the food with his hands. He made a gesture of absolute disgust. He pointed with his chin to a large, heavy metal drum at the service entrance, where cigarette butts, sludge, and chemical waste accumulated. "In the trash," said Sterling. "Now." Arthur let out a broken sob, a horrible sound of defeat. He stood up with difficulty, walked slowly to the bin. He looked one last time at the warm bread, at the promise of relief from the pain in his stomach. And then he opened his hand. The food fell into the filthy trash with a muffled, final sound. Sterling smiled. A thin smile, without joy, only satisfaction. "See? Trash belongs in the trash. Order has been restored." Sterling turned to Elias, who was paralyzed, white as a sheet, fists clenched at his sides, shaking with a rage he never knew he possessed. "Get inside," said Sterling, brushing an imaginary raindrop from his shoulder. "Let's finish this inside. I want everyone to see." The firing wasn't done in a private office. Sterling made a point of stopping in the middle of the luxurious lobby. He snapped his fingers. The music stopped. The guests looked over. "Attention, everyone," Sterling's voice filled the room. "We have here an example of what we do not tolerate." He turned to Elias. "Your badge. Now." Elias, with trembling hands, removed the badge from his chest. "Empty your apron pockets," Sterling continued. "I want to make sure you aren't taking any more leftovers from our hotel." In front of everyone, colleagues lowering their heads in shame, guests judging in silence, Elias had to turn his pockets inside out. Only a cheap pen and a notepad fell out. "You are a disappointment, Elias," said Sterling, loud enough for the front desk to hear. "You have contaminated the integrity of this establishment. You brought the street inside the Grandview. Get out. Security will escort you to the curb, and don't expect a letter of recommendation." Two huge security guards approached, grabbing Elias by the arms as if he were a dangerous criminal. He was dragged out of the golden revolving doors. 5 minutes later, Elias was on the sidewalk. No umbrella, no job, no plan. The rain soaked him instantly. He felt cold, but inside he was burning. The shock was passing, giving way to a crystalline clarity. He looked to the side. Arthur was still there, sitting on the curb, crying silently, hugging his knees, defeated. Elias looked at the warm, golden lights of the hotel. He saw Sterling inside, laughing with a guest as if nothing had happened. Elias, who now had nothing left to lose, walked to the curb. He had no more hotel food, but he had his wallet. He had the money meant for the week's transport. He crouched beside Arthur on the wet, dirty sidewalk. Not as a waiter serving a customer, but as an equal. "Hey," said Elias. Arthur looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. You lost everything because of me." "Don't apologize," said Elias firmly, holding the man's shoulder. "You did nothing wrong. That man in there, he is the one who is poor. He has all the money in the world, but he is the most miserable, empty person I have ever met." Elias took the money out of his pocket. They were crumpled bills, everything he had in his wallet. "Stand up," said Elias, helping Arthur to his feet. "I lost my job, but I didn't lose my humanity. There's a diner on the corner. Let's eat. It's on me." And there, under the torrential rain, the two walked. An unemployed ex-waiter and a homeless man. The lights of the Grandview shone behind them, cold and distant. But the human warmth, the kind Sterling tried to erase and throw in the trash, walked with them. Elias never went back to the hotel industry. That day broke something in him, but it also fixed something else. He realized that the excellence the Grandview sold was a lie. There is no excellence without empathy. There is no luxury that justifies cruelty. That manager, Mr. Sterling, probably continued his life, polishing marble and terrorizing employees, believing he won. But he lost the only thing that really matters at the end of the journey, the ability to feel another's pain. Elias paid a high price for that sandwich. It cost him his salary, his stability, the future he planned. But that night, sharing a cheap, hot soup with Arthur in a simple diner on the corner, seeing the color return to that man's face, Elias slept with a conscience cleaner than any Egyptian linen sheet at the Grandview. And you? If you were holding that tray, would you have followed the rule and turned your back? Or would you have followed your heart, even knowing the punishment would come? Today's story ends here, but the reflection stays with you. Don't forget, the world can be cold, but we don't have to be. If this story touched you, leave a like. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of what really matters. I am the narrator of After the Fall, and I'll see you in the next story.